Hello and welcome back to this edition of Bayou Time. I'm your host, Keith Whiteside. Thank you for joining us, however you may be joining us. We appreciate it very, very much, and always glad to get one of our local leaders here. Representative Tanner Magee is joining us. Tanner, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me back on. Always enjoy being here.
We appreciate it. You know, it is a topic of conversation with all of our friends and neighbors, all of the people here around the area in Terrebonne and Lafourche. We talk about where we stand. Are we back in our house yet? And I just found out I got a friend of mine who just got his roof covered last Monday.
It's crazy. It's really seeing how slow the recovery can be is frustrating for everybody, including myself. And seeing how slow it is for some and how fast it is for others, and seeing the disparity between the randomness between who FEMA. You know, I know of a FEMA situation right now where the dad is being kicked out of his FEMA trailer, and his son is still allowed to stay in his because they're saying the dad lives in a flood zone and they live about 2 houses down from each other, and they're both in a flood zone. It's just, there's no rhyme or reason to this stuff, and you almost wonder, if anybody has any kind of common sense left. But yeah, it can be definitely frustrating.
Yeah. So I know we've got a lot of, we were fortunate to talk with ROUs and talk about the number of people that are in trailers, whether it be state or FEMA, about 2,500 families. And so we're just 2,500 trailers, that is, and family members are a whole lot more than that. And here we're having to kind of gear up for what's next. I know they're trying to get a lot of those anchored because, we're kind of on the cusp of hurricane season coming.
Yeah. And look, it seems like Ida was a lifetime ago and it was yesterday all at the same time. And then we turn around and we're facing another storm season and people are already vulnerable. It's a lot of concern as far as are we prepared enough right now for what could possibly come in. So I think we're very mindful of it, and I think we're kind of scared at the same time. In a good way scared, not in a bad way scared.
Right. Cautious. We're call that eustress.
Yeah.
That's positive stress,
right.
Where it's that stress that makes us think, okay, how are things going to be better? How do we make sure that things are okay?
And we need to act.
For us and act soon. Anything you're hearing from your constituents about some of the struggles that they're having that are just maybe a little different than the rest of us, like you and I trying to get back in our house?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is dealing the frustration. I hear the most comments with the insurance company, the frustration with the mortgage company, which I think nobody really anticipated when I think people knew they'd have problems with FEMA. We've been around this block before. I think people knew they had problems with their insurance company. I think all those issues but I think nobody really anticipated that you would maybe get your check from your insurance company, it'd be no big deal, and then the mortgage company would hold on to your check for. And one of the things that frustrates me, and we actually have legislation on it to address it right now, is they take your food reimbursement checks, your cost of living expenses checks. Because often the insurance company will just send you one check for what they owe you.
Right.
They take the whole check, and the mortgage company's holding on to your food expense money. And so we have legislation right now meant to address that issue, where basically the insurance company could only issue issue separate checks, and they can't put the mortgage company on your food and expense check. That way it can go direct to you. We're also trying to get it where the mortgage company can only require you to sign off on a check up to the amount of the mortgage, because you have this weird situation too. We may get a check for $200,000, but you only owe $40,000 on your mortgage. Why is your mortgage company entitled to the other $160 at all?
Yeah, how can they hold on to that?
How can they hold on to it? It's ridiculous. So we are addressing those concerns, and I think you learn every time, and so we're hopefully the next time we don't have to deal with those issues.
Well, and you were the first person to help me understand that we learned a lot from Lake Charles, from Laura, and that we're trying to learn from what they did to put things in place. And here we are learning again from Ida, because it's a whole new set of issues, it seems.
It is, and that's one of the things I've had these conversations with a lot of people. Even with Laura, it's just a totally different scenario versus Ida. We've never seen this kind of wind damage on a massive scale, maybe ever in the history of Louisiana. So I think that's one of the biggest problems. It's a unique storm from that standpoint. And so everything is a little bit more, I don't want to say difficult, but it's a new challenge.
Right.
And
it's another layer of challenges.
It's another layer of challenges. So even when you start comparing all these things, and when you start talking about insurance rates and flood zone stuff, it gets really complicated. But yeah, every experience is a learning experience.
And I had an interesting learning experience. I got to meet with FEMA. I just realized that my wife and I decided that even though we don't have a lien on our house, we we need some extra money to be able to cover all of the expenses. And so we've gone through that FEMA process. And it's interesting that I've got to turn in 2 different forms to my insurance about what they may have paid for flood and what they may have paid for wind and hail damage. And those are separate, and they got to be filled and completed and then brought back to FEMA. And just it's just the jumping through the hoops. I just thought it would be, I don't know why, if ideologically, probably somebody needs to talk to me. I had this idea that it was going to be easy.
Right. Right. Yeah, no, I think.
Or like contractors would be easy.
That's another issue. I mean, I think
Right.
people are also having the dance between their insurance company and what their contractor promised them. I mean, that's another issue. And a lot of times, what the contractor promised, wasn't really what he could live up to. And so you're seeing those kind of that rubber at the road. I tell people all the time, every industry is, I find, like 90% good actors, but every industry has 10% bad actors. And we're trying to make rules for the bad actors so they can't do what they're doing. But so I don't like to dump on contractors. I don't like to dump on anybody.
No. But there's a percentage of them.
There's a percentage of them
creating about 90% of the problems.
Right, and taking advantage of people
right.
and taking advantage
Yeah.
of situations, and you're going to see that across the board with every storm.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you and I are in a very similar boat, and so many others, maybe a little bit worse off, maybe a little bit better off, but we're all kind of still battling, if you will, with the same thing. And the battle will keep continuing.
Yeah, neither one of us has floors in our house right now.
That is exactly right. And so hopefully that'll change very, very soon. And it's been an interesting process, I think, as you guys have really did a really good job preparing us for what this redistricting map would look like and the issues that went with it, and now the veto that has come from the governor. Let's talk a little bit about that process. And I know we talked about it some, but the process and what it means for us now.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. The Constitution of Louisiana gives the authority to draw all of the maps for the state and the federal map to the legislature. It is our obligation to draw these maps. And then we have 105 members in the House, 36 members in the Senate. We have, obviously, that's a lot of opinions. That's a lot of people. And I tell people all the time, try and pick a place for dinner at night and try and get 105 opinions on what's the best place to go to. That's what we're doing. And we're trying to draw something that's a puzzle.
Right.
It's a map, and because the numbers have to be exact, the numbers have to be proportionate, and you have to conform to the U.S. Constitution, the Voters' Right Act, and then you got to make enough people happy to pass the map.
Right.
So this is not the easiest of circumstances, to be honest with you, to do all those things. We passed maps on the State House map, State Senate map, Congressional map. That's the one people care about. We did other ones too, but nobody really gets ruffled about that.
Right.
The governor did not sign the State House map, and he did not sign the State Senate map, but he let them become law. So those maps are law right now. Of course, we were sued before we even showed up at the Capitol saying we were not going to draw a map properly, because that's kind of the world we live in now in politics. Everything is also litigation. So we always knew these maps were going to end up in court in some kind of way. So those were, in my opinion, fast-tracked to the courts, the State House map and the Senate map. And now we have the Congressional map, which the governor vetoed. And really what it breaks out is we have 6 congressmen now. We have 1 minority district now. What we did is that map, the current map, was approved by the Obama administration as pre-clearance, as comporting to all the things I talked about.
Right.
So our thinking was, well, let's stay as close to that map as we can, because we know that it's a map that works.
Right.
You also have sitting congressmen in all of those maps. So people are like, oh, why don't you do this? Like, okay, you want to cut Steve Scalise out of his map? Is that what you're trying to tell me right now? Like, the guy who's number 3 can bring us all kind of money to Louisiana, that guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like a very good idea to me. So my point being is there are people who actually are holding those offices, makes it even more complicated.
Right, in those seats.
In those seats, and they definitely have an interest in all of these maps that are being drawn. So, we're getting called by everybody in the federal government about these maps. So it's a very complicated process. Long story short, the governor wanted a second minority-majority district. That's a complicated thing to do. It's a lot easier, and they make the math sound real simple, that a third of Louisiana is minority, therefore you should have
a third representative.
A third, which would be 2 seats. It doesn't work that way because people don't live like that. They live in concentrated areas. A lot of them are here. What you would do in that scenario, if you truly did it, first of all, you'd be drawing a sitting congressman out of their office. The second thing you'd be doing is you would be diluting that voting pool down to 51% minority, which actually doesn't really guarantee you're going to get the result that they're
That's
after.
correct. Yeah.
And then the other thing, and if you don't choose that route, you have to draw one of those Zorro districts, we call it, because it makes a Z across the state that we've already found out to be unconstitutional because we lost federal litigation on that years ago, way before my time. That said, but anyway, the governor still vetoed that map that basically was a traditional map of Louisiana. And so we went back yesterday and had the veto override session. And I think that we were able to get enough votes to override the governor on the issue. Barely. It takes 2/3 super majority, not just a majority.
Super majority.
Super majority. 53 is majority in the House.
Right.
70 is a super. We got 72 votes. There's only 68 Republicans, so we don't have a supermajority to override the governor. People ask all the time, why don't you do that? It's like, well, it's not as easy as that sounds either. You got to.
You can't snap your finger and get that done.
Can't get that done. We had every Republican voting for it, and we picked up 3 independents. 2 independents and 1 Democrat voted with us.
Oh, wow.
And the Democrat who voted with us is represented by Congressman Julia Letlow. And so, his thinking, which I think is correct, is he really likes her, thinks she's a good congressperson, and she's probably, if you're going to change the map, she's the district that's going to go away. And so he was not comfortable drawing out his congressperson, who he likes a whole lot and thinks does a very good job.
Right.
I think that's the logic there. So that's what we did yesterday. Then it went on to the Senate, and then they also agreed with us, and they got their votes as well. The Senate does have a supermajority of Republicans, so it's a little bit easier of a math for them to do to get there. So we did it all in about an hour. Really, it was kind of
That's remarkable.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting to see, and that's where we are.
Well, and the really good news about that is that everybody was well educated about, because a lot of these things I know how you've talked about how lengthy some of these bills that you're expected to know everything about to be able to vote on. But this one, everybody was well prepared for what they probably were going to do.
Yes, absolutely. And look, these congressional districts are 777,000 people in a congressional district. And really, a lot of times you're getting fighting about 4,000 people, 2,000 people, and it's like, dude.
Look at the volume of what's going to be impacted here.
Exactly.
And almost 800,000
And they have to be exact. And
Yeah.
that's the thing people don't understand. These districts have to be exact. There's almost no standard of deviation, which means we can't barely move off that number. We have to draw it exactly to that number. And it has to comport to all the rules. It's a very, very difficult task. And get at least 53 votes the first time, 70 the second
70 plus
time. Yeah.
The second time.
And you
got it.
And we did it. So, I am proud of us that we were able to get to that point.
Yeah, it's always good to be able to see what we've been able to move forward from something. And so, Tanner, we were talking last segment about all of the votes that were needed, and now we get to move forward and go to court.
That's right. Exactly. So all of that brings us now into the court system, where it's going to be litigated about whether we did actually comply with the Voting Rights Act and all these different various measures that we had to comply to. I think that based off of using the last map as the guide, that we knew made it to all those standards, we're in a really good position for it to. But look, nobody knows what the courts are going to do.
That's correct.
That's one of the things I've said from the very beginning. You only can do the best you can.
Right. And speaking of doing the best you can, you're always, and one of the things I'm most impressed by with all of our representatives and senators in this area, really fighting for what Louisiana needs. Let's talk a little bit about some of the things. I know you had mentioned some of the insurance plans that y'all had put in place and some bills that protect people from their insurance or their mortgage companies taking money from the insurance company they really shouldn't. Let's talk a little bit about some of the things that maybe y'all have in place that you're kind of wanting to get passed.
Yeah, and look, this is a unique opportunity for the state of Louisiana right now. One thing that we would all agree with the governor on is we've never had this much money in the state of Louisiana, based off of a whole lot of factors. I think people incorrectly think it's all Biden money from the Build Back Better. That's really actually a very small piece. We have surpluses on our own of $800 million right now, based off of a lot of inflated stuff that's happening because of Ida and Laura. Right. That pumps up sales tax, and so we do have it's not going to be there forever,
right? Kind
of situation. I don't want people to think that the $800 million is going to be there in 3 years. We know that it won't be there in 3 years. But right now we have a very unique opportunity where we have about $4 billion that we would not normally have across with the COVID stuff too. So there's a whole area of things. We can change the direction of the state if we invest those dollars correctly,
wisely.
Wisely, yes, and then we can also waste this opportunity. And I think It's keeping me up at night. I'm not sleeping as much as I normally do, just thinking about it. So, we're going to be looking at heavy investments in infrastructure in the state, using this because that's the one thing you're not creating as an expense later down the line that you can't pay for. You can use the money now. You can leverage even more federal dollars with the money, do a bunch of road and bridges projects, and people don't realize we have a $14 billion backlog of what we call mega construction projects in Louisiana. These are projects that we know have significant benefit to the economy, bridges, major highways, $14 billion of backlog. There's no shortage. And we only got $4 billion, so it's not like we can write the check for all of them tomorrow. It's about doing it. And then part of that is IDA recovery, using those dollars in a way that we can maximize our recovery down here. I think we're also looking at how do we restructure, I think, the response after IDA. That's one of the big things that's been big on my agenda, if you want. Yeah, a great way of saying it. So those are all the little big picture items. Short time, remember, we have bills to address a whole host of things. And I'll take one of my bills that I'm actually sort of proud of that has nothing to do with anything we talked about, but I think it's something you're going to like is it's got bipartisan support from the NRA, support from the liberal groups, is we are allowing, if you're a veteran, it's directed at veterans, but it's for everybody. If you're going through a mental health issue, and you're uncomfortable being around your guns, which a lot of people do, and the veteran community sees it a lot. And this came with talking to some people at the VA hospital. Because they have a lot of veterans that go to them and say, look, I just don't feel like I should be around my gun right now. They might not have a place to go. So what my bill is going to do is going to allow you to bring your gun to the gun store, or the dealer who sold you the gun, or who didn't sell it to you, just a gun store. That guy can hold it for you free of charge, and as long as you feel until you're ready. And then you come back, get your guns. And Arizona tried a program, but they did it with law enforcement. What they found out is people are afraid to give their guns to law enforcement, they're not going to get them back. And that's not what we want to do. We want to encourage you to be a responsible person. And so this bill, I think, is a really nice touchstone that everybody can agree on, that we can help people in a time of need, maybe save a suicide, save something even worse. If that person knows he's not in the right headspace to be around his gun, but he's otherwise a very responsible gun owner.
And what a great idea. I love this, by the way. I'm wondering if there could be another faction of that where there's some oversight about the returning of that gun based on whomever it is that they go to see if, some counselor or someone saying, yes, this person is no longer actively suicidal or homicidal or, those kinds of things. I love the awareness on the front end of somebody saying, I just shouldn't be around guns. We see this a lot with people with dementia that we identify.
And one of the big things is that the gun owners, there's a guy in Lafayette who's been doing it. He's kind of the guy he does his thing. He'll keep up to you for a year, your gun's up to you, he cleans them for you, and he returns to you better than you dropped them off.
Wow.
But he couldn't get any other gun stores to do it because they were afraid of being sued. And so my bill actually does is, because they're afraid they give the gun back and you go do something with it, that he's going to be
accountable.
And you're accountable. So what my bill actually does is remove the liability from the gun store owner. It does some other things too, but that's the main thing, so that, hey, look, I am the depository of this gun, the safekeeper of it, but I'm not responsible for what you do with your gun, is really what the bill does. And that's why it has broad support from the NRA and everybody, because it's not aimed at the gun store guy. And it's meant to encourage that drop off.
What a great idea. I mean, it really is. It looks at what a real problem is right now with people who become unstable at times, because people don't always stay unstable. That's just one of those things. They can become like that. What a great idea.
And I know, Keith, sometimes just their medication's off.
That is correct.
It's just as simple as getting the medication levels at the right track, and then they're completely fine.
And that's where my point was about making sure that they're stable about it. Some great recommendations. Tanner, we always appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that will do it for this particular segment of Bayou Time. And so thank you so much for joining us. A lot more local programming here on HTV.